This is the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Now on that same day, when Jesus had appeared to Mary Magdalene, 2 disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened.
Can you believe everything that happened?
While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them,
"What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?"
And then they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him,
Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?
What things?
The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and in word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see him.
Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?
Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village, Emmaus, to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying,
"Stay with us, because it's almost evening, and the day is now nearly over."
So he went in to stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight.
That's me.
They said to each other,
Were not your hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?
That same hour, they got up and returned back to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord. Amazing work, my goodness. Thank you, Tobiah, Jen, Michelle, for going above and beyond the normal call of duty of being a lector. I considered for a little while how we could make Tobiah completely vanish, but I figured that installing a trap door under the altar might be a little beyond the pastor's discretionary fund. Just wait for next time, though. We'll see. I asked our fearless friends to help perform this text this morning because this story practically begs us not only to hear it or to read it, but to experience it. Sometimes it can be easy from our perch here in the 21st century, far and away from the events of the cross, the tomb, and the resurrection, to simply analyze these stories as ancient events, old news about faraway people. And yet, as Easter people, these stories are not only our scriptural heritage, they also speak to the reality of resurrection that we are meant to experience still today. Ultimately, the resurrection is not so much a doctrine to be believed as it is an ongoing reality to be experienced. Turning to our gospel passage, which is the story from which we get our church's name, Emmaus, not Emmaus, as most reporters typically pronounce it. Luke treats us to a vivid scene. This unique story helps us see the poignant moments of doubt and despondence that the disciples experienced in the aftermath of Jesus' death. These feelings are not unlike our own sometimes. Sometimes we doubt with Thomas. Sometimes the luster of Easter fades and the proclamation of resurrection feels hollow. In those moments, we are not so different from generations of Easter people before us who have wavered, struggled, and feared that perhaps Jesus is still in the grave. Just like those earliest disciples, we do not always live in a constant state of Easter joy. The onslaught of bad news and the many, many reasons for pessimism that exist in our world can leave us feeling hollow. And that feeling can scarcely be overcome with words or teaching or creeds, as important as those are. We long for a similar experience of Jesus appearing in our midst. And so this morning, I want to invite you beyond words into the power of your imaginations. I want you to come with me on a time travel adventure. I want you to put yourself in the dusty sandals of those two followers that Jen and Michelle embodied as they walk toward Emmaus, this little village from which they were from. So if you feel comfortable, please close your eyes with me. Take a deep breath and transport yourself through time and space to a dusty corner of the Mediterranean world, just outside the walls of the holy city of Jerusalem. It's late in the day on a Sunday night. You can feel the last moments of daylight touching your skin as you say your goodbyes to Jesus' remaining disciples in an upper room in Jerusalem, where so many of his followers had gathered. Your head swims with all the chaos and mind-boggling events of the last few days. You had seen Jesus from a distance, the only place you felt safe witnessing his horrific execution. You still feel the stabbing pangs in your heart every time you hear the echo of the soldier's hammer strike the nails in Jesus' flesh. You remember how awful Saturday had been, how the world felt heavy and gray and drab, and food tasted like ash in your mouth. And you remember the peculiar flutterings of hope and confusion when the women who came back from Jesus' tomb claimed it was empty. They said they had seen angels there instead of Jesus' body. But you wouldn't let yourself believe such nonsense. Such hope is dangerous. Your heart couldn't bear to lose Jesus again. So you guard yourself, cloak yourself in the very rational belief that such things do not take place. Dead bodies do not rise again. There's nothing left to be done now. So you begin your journey home. Fortunately, home is not too far from Jerusalem, just about 7 miles to Emmaus. It'll be nice to get back to your normal rhythms again after the turbulence of the past week. As you and your friend begin the somber walk home, you run through all the things that had happened once again. Sad things, wild things, hopes dashed and sparks of hope rekindled. You had just started discussing the empty tomb when you realize someone else is walking beside you. And the man is friendly and somehow blissfully unaware of all the things you've witnessed. Incredulous, you ask, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" Apparently he is. And so you tell him. You tell him of your hopes of redemption, your hopes of change. You tell him, aware of how crazy it sounds, about the empty tomb of this would-be Messiah. You tell him about angels. Even angels, you tell this stranger about. To your surprise, he responds not with skepticism at your story, but incredulity at your skepticism. He upbraids you, calls you foolish, starts to talk about the Messiah, something about suffering and the scriptures and glory. And you feel your heart burn with hope. But still, you cannot quite make meaning of it. Have you met this man before? You're welcome to open your eyes again if you haven't already. As you listened, as you experienced this story, I wonder if you could feel it. That torturous mix of doubt and hope, that tension between grief and the catharsis of sharing your story with others. I won't ask you to close your eyes again, although you could if you want to take a nap. But the story does go on. Despite the stranger's energetic rebuke of them and his impromptu explanation of the scriptures, the disciples offer hospitality to the unrecognized Christ when they reach their destination. They welcome him into their house. And then, at that point, it happens. Revelation. Unveiling. Jesus, though he is the guest, takes on the role of the host all of a sudden. The gospel says that when he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Sound familiar? They recognized him in that moment. This was Jesus. Broken faith was nurtured by broken bread. And then he vanished from their sight. And this portrait of the disciples as slow to comprehend isn't meant to shame them. It's meant to remind us that we are not so different even now. We are the ones who have heard the reports of resurrection. We are the ones who have been taught the scriptures, but not always grasped them or their import. We are the ones who have perhaps even followed the ethical teachings of Scripture and offered hospitality to the stranger, and yet somehow still not recognized the living, resurrected Christ before us in the faces of others. Fortunately, our understanding of grace tells us that the ability to see the resurrected Christ is not up to us. You can't strain hard enough or think clearly enough to experience the revelation of the resurrected Christ. In the text, it's notable that the passive voice, to use a grammatical phrase, is used to describe not only that the eyes of the disciples were closed, but also that the eyes of the disciples were opened. God is the closer and the opener of eyes here. Ultimately, God alone reveals God's self to us. And yet, this text gives us a few clues how we might encounter the incognito Christ. Revelation, we see, may come through conversation and questions like the disciples were doing on the way to Emmaus. Revelation may come through the honest sharing of our disappointments. Revelation may come through the searching of scriptures. Revelation may come through the hospitality to strangers, through the breaking of bread with one another. The reality of resurrection is that it is all around us. Resurrection life is not just some abstraction, some metaphor. It's in the beauty of the earth. It's in the tenderness of care for others. Resurrection life is what enlivens the meal that we are about to eat. It's not Christ's dead body that we offer to one another, but Christ's living, resurrected body that we say is given for you. We experience resurrection life through these means of God's grace, through this meal that feeds us and this space that holds us, through the waters of baptism that little Amelia experienced just the other week, and the embrace of people that are sitting on either side of you in these pews. Resurrection life flows through us. The invitation of this story about the road to Emmaus is to ask, where will you experience the reality of resurrection this week? Where will you experience revelation? Will it be in the gift of hospitality? Will it be in the opening of the scriptures? Will it be on the road of discipleship, leaving behind a past you can't fully comprehend and wandering into an unknown future? Will it be in our shared meal, the breaking of bread, the singing of songs, the sharing of peace? Wherever God finds you today and this week, may your hearts burn within you as God surprises your heart with the revelation of the resurrected Christ. Amen.